Hello everybody, so welcome to Why Japanese People. So today we're actually going to do a little bit of a more serious, I guess, topic, and that is for those language learners that want to learn Japanese or want to move to Japan in the near future or maybe later on in their life. What we're going to talk about is my own experiences in learning Japanese as a foreigner, more so than a half Japanese person. What I want to go over today is, I guess, firstly my own experience growing up as a half Japanese, half Australian person overseas, and then moving to Japan when I was about 24 years old, I think. So it's been over 4 years now, and I just kind of wanted to talk about what my level was when I first came to Japan, and then where it's sort of progressed to now, and then how I sort of managed to improve quite rapidly, I would say, compared to a lot of other people who have lived in Japan. Yeah, so this video is mainly for people who are already studying Japanese or that want to sort of move into Japanese and maybe move to Japan in the future. I know I did just say that. But yeah, so I want to give maybe 7 or 8 tips. I've kind of wrote everything down on my phone here, and I'll just go over them one by one with you. I also just wanted to mention as well that since my mum is Japanese, there was Japanese sometimes spoken in the household, so I definitely did get an advantage over a lot of other people. However, I will say that I didn't really speak much Japanese from my side, so my listening skills were quite, I would say, higher than most people who come to Japan, but my speaking ability and especially writing and reading was absolutely dreadful when I first came to Japan. So actually when I was about 9 to 10 years old, I think, I did go to Japanese school on Saturdays, every Saturday for about 2 years or something like that, which my mum made me go to. And then when I was about 12 years old, I think, I had to either choose between soccer or Japanese school. And obviously all my friends chose soccer. I mean, none of them were actually learning Japanese, so it was a really easy choice for me at the time to sort of discontinue my Japanese learning. Not that it was ever my choice, and then move to, I guess, soccer and just hanging out with my friends and having that normal sort of Australian life instead, which is something that I definitely do regret now, although obviously at the time I didn't know that I was going to be moving to Japan after university and also staying here for such a long amount of time. Fast forwarding about 13 years, I finished university throughout primary school, middle school or high school in Australia, and then university. I pretty much spoke no Japanese at all. And since my university was in the countryside, the chance, I didn't actually speak to my mum that much, and my mum was kind of the only person around me that spoke Japanese. I actually remember when I first came to Japan, I realized how low my Japanese level was. I think when you're living overseas, or in my case when I was back in Australia, since there was no Japanese around, you couldn't really judge. There was no way to gauge how strong or how weak your Japanese level was. So then when I first came here to move, when I had to apply for jobs and things like that, I realized that my Japanese ability was absolutely dreadful. When I first came to Japan, I actually moved straight to Hakuba, which is a ski resort in the Nagano prefecture. And initially I was just going to work there and potentially just move straight back to Australia. So after the winter season, I actually decided to move back to Tokyo and see what I could do in terms of work and see if I could sort of build a life here with the limited Japanese ability that I had at the time. I think I applied for maybe 5 different jobs. Some of them were really bizarre. One of them was, I think, like a bartender, which is not bizarre. The other one was a robot restaurant, which is, if you've ever been to Japan, you probably have heard about the tourist trap, which is robot restaurant, which is located in Shibuya, but I definitely did not want to take that. So the 3 jobs I did decide to take were, one was a hall staff or a wait staff in a restaurant called Mr. Farmer, which is located in Omotesando. Definitely check it out when you're next in Japan, Mr. Farmer Omotesando. The other job I did was part-time English teaching, which is your pretty much, your standard baito when you come to Japan as an English speaker. And number 3 was modeling, and I was kind of juggling all 3 of those at the same time, which was pretty tiring. So the reason why I bring this up is to say how important it is to actually be in an environment where they speak the language that you want to learn. So they only spoke Japanese in the restaurant. A lot of the time I kind of didn't really know what the hell was happening, and that was fine. Everyone was really, really nice. I made a lot of good friends, and if there was some things that I didn't know how to do, like managing the till in Japanese, and that was definitely a bit of a learning curve. As you may know, there is sort of a few different levels of Japanese in terms of politeness, so getting used to that sort of keigo way of speaking to customers was definitely a difficult one. Yeah, and that sort of was the starting point of I guess my rapid improvement. I'm not sure if it's even rapid. Maybe I'm sure there's a lot of people who have learned a language much faster than I have for sure. So after juggling those jobs for a couple of months, I managed to find a job in one of Japan's, I guess, most traditional advertising company, or one of their group companies. And that definitely was the thing that increased my work-related professional Japanese keigo and those sort of things, which are incredibly important if you want to work in any sort of professional industry in Japan. So in terms of actual tips, when you do move to Japan and if you land yourself a job in a Japanese environment, what I did was I took notes pretty much every single day and just wrote down any words that came up in meetings or in work seminars or anything like that, or even just sort of like conversations with finance or with my other team members. And I would come up with maybe a list of 100 to 200 words sometimes a week, and try and remember those. Obviously not only to understand what that person's saying next time, but also I tried to make the conscious decision to use those words that I've learned. But yeah, I think that's definitely the biggest takeaway there, is that if you learn a word, you actually have to put it into practice. You have to use that word. You know, if you use that word 3 times, it's pretty much, from my experience, I don't think I've ever forgotten a word if I use it 3 times over sort of a week or 2 weeks or something like that. It was sort of a difficult, I guess, trick to get used to, because you had to sort of keep recollecting those words that you learnt and then try and naturally slide them into the conversation, which was sometimes a bit weird. But overall, I think it's definitely the best thing to do in terms of especially building your vocabulary. Another thing that obviously helped enormously was just being in that sort of Japanese environment, especially where it's always keigo. There's always that sort of joge kanke, hierarchical relationship between everyone around you, or between those 2 relationships with these members and those members. Your sort of senpais and their kohais, and sort of how they speak to each other, and sort of being exposed to that senpai kohai relationships and how they speak and interact with each other, which is a very big thing in, I'm sure most of you probably already know, in the Japanese work. Knowing how to address your senpai or your superiors is very different to talking to your, anyone that's younger than you, or at a lower rank or lower position in the work, lower position in the team or the work structure. So overall, I would say that working in a Japanese environment is key, is absolutely, I wouldn't say essential, because I know people that have studied Japanese without working in a Japanese working environment. But for me personally, I don't think I would learn half the words I did if I was just speaking to friends. Number 2 is textbooks and JLPT study. For those of you who don't know what JLPT is, it is the Japanese Learning Proficiency Tests. So in total, there's 5 levels of them, from JLPT N5, which is the lowest or the easiest to do, I guess, and then all the way up to N1, which is the hardest, and kind of means that you can apply for pretty much most jobs in Japan. For me personally, I skipped 5 and 4 just because I kind of had that base knowledge and jumped straight into JLPT N3, I think 6 months after I came to Japan. And then about 1 year after that, I tried JLPT N1, and I failed it the first time. And then about a year after that, in 2018 or 19, I tried it again, and then I luckily passed. And it was very close. I almost failed that one again. I think overall I bought about 15 to 25 books of the various JLPT series. So I've tried about 3 different series for the JLPT exams, and the one that I would recommend the most is called the Shinkansen Master. They are the most, I guess, text heavy and wordy. There's no English in them. There's no English definitions for the grammar. So you have to learn the entire thing in Japanese, which is, I mean, it has its pros and cons, but I would say the pros definitely outweigh the cons for sure. So similar to what I was speaking about before, whenever you learn anything from these books, it's important to actually put those into practice. I remember when I first moved to Japan and I was doing N3, I was living in this place called Koenji, and it was a really great town. And there was a lot of drunk people on the street that sort of just hung out on sort of the corners outside the konbinis and would drink around there. So I spoke to a lot of the oji-sans on the street and became really good friends with those. I remember on several different occasions I would learn a bunch of different new words or grammar points, and I would put them into practice on the street. Obviously the alcohol did help quite a lot as well, but it was definitely a really good learning tool. There's a lot of people looking at me in this park right now. So I guess related to this, and I think I might talk about this a bit later on as well, but when you actually learn these grammar points and these new words, if you're not in an environment that allows you to sort of practice those words with other people, I would recommend a website called Japa Talk, which is only about $4 for half an hour. The main point there is learn a bunch of new different words and then actually use them. If you don't have someone close to you that speaks Japanese, then go online and try and reach out for a partner, a language partner, or that website that I told you, Japa Talk. Definitely recommended. Number 3 is friends and your social group. Now this is massively important. It sort of allows you to be more comfortable around people your own age and be able to talk about things that people our age or whatever age you are talk about. And often those sort of topics that aren't brought up in the workforce or your professional life will be brought up in that sort of your private life, like relationships and I guess hobbies and, you know, more deeper conversations about what you want to do in the future and things like that. It sounds kind of obvious, but I think working in sort of that Japanese environment is really good for leveling up your professional language skills, but it's a completely different skill set or language when you're talking to your friends, for example. And in my opinion, having a group of non-English speaking friends is incredibly important since it forces you into talking that language, or in this case, Japanese. One massively important thing is being able to get a sense of humor and sort of make people laugh and make yourself laugh, I guess, not be so serious. It's quite difficult to sort of tune that, I guess, and have any sort of defined sense of humor in a second language. But having sort of a group of friends, a close group of friends, definitely is the easiest environment to be able to sort of develop that sense of humor. But yeah, obviously the more time you spend with that group that can't speak English, the better your Japanese gets. Number 4. Is it number 4? Yeah. Dating, I would say. So when I first moved to Japan, I did date a couple of girls that couldn't speak any English or very limited English. But then I got into a full-term long relationship for about 2.5, 3 years almost with a girl that was completely bilingual. So we mainly spoke in English, but I would say it was maybe 80-20, 70-30, depending on the day. But I think if you had a long-term relationship and you lived with the girl or the guy and only spoke in Japanese for however long you were together for, your Japanese level would definitely improve significantly. Number 5, TV and music. So I would say TV and music helped me, I would say, the most consistently throughout my years in Japan. Unfortunately for me at least, I didn't really ever like anime, as I mentioned before. However, I did watch a couple of animes like One Piece and Death Note, for example, but I was much more interested in sort of like the dramas on TV, and I'm sure you probably know about the super famous Netflix TV show Terrace House. I think I watched maybe 3 out of 4 seasons of that. So definitely if you're living overseas, watch Terrace House. I think it's really good for language learning. Another really good tip I would say is if you're at the level where you can read kanji, then what I would do is if you're watching a movie in English, you would put the subtitles in Japanese on. So that obviously helps your kanji, but also your vocabulary. Another thing that you can do recently as well is on Netflix, if you have a VPN, you can change it to Japan, watch the actual TV shows with the Japanese voiceover, and then put the English subtitles on if you still need those, or if you don't need those, you can just put them in Japanese as well. But even though you're watching maybe like Mission Impossible or Die Hard or any American movie, if you watch it, if you change the audio to Japanese, you know the story as well. I think that's a really good way to learn new words. And of course, listening to Japanese music definitely does help as well. One thing that I would recommend doing is finding music that you like, and hopefully it's major music. I know there's a lot of songs that I like that aren't on karaoke machines, but if they are, what you can do is learn those songs completely word for word and then be able to sing those. That not only helps your pronunciation, but obviously your reading speed, and you get used to the kanjis in the lyrics as well. Some popular artists that I listened to recently, I would say that the majority of the music I listen to are not popular. I'll put them on the screen now. But like Hiraiken is really good. Radwimps, there's a few other ones as well that you can definitely have a look at on Spotify or whatever. Okay, so tip number 6 is using language learning applications. I used to probably have maybe 6 or 7 different language applications at the start, and I tried to use all of them. But after a couple of months, I realized that only about 2 or 3 of them were useful. My favorite one that I still use to date is an application called Japanese, which is literally just a dictionary. But every single month, I sort of list up all the words that come up, maybe in the news or in meetings or in just conversations or TV shows or whatever that I don't know. Or number 2, I didn't know the kanji of that I would write down, and then list them all up and then I'd study them and make sure I knew all the words. Ideally, like I said before, you would output that word, but some of those words are very difficult, and it's kind of difficult to get those words out in just like a normal conversation, especially words that come up in the news. There's a lot of words in Japanese news. I'm sure it's the same everywhere as well. I'm sure it's the same pretty much everywhere in the world, but there's words that only come up in certain situations, like on the news, but just being able to understand what that word means is very, very important. This is just a quick example of one of the lists that I made. So this was for the end of February, where you kind of just list up, I'm not sure if that's going to focus or not, but you just list up all the different words, and then you kind of look through them when you're on the train or like in the car, I don't know, whenever you have a free minute, on the toilet, when you're having your alone time, whatever, just have a quick look through them. The other application that I wanted to introduce you to was an app called Kanji Lookup. Maybe a lot of times you see kanji on signs or menus that aren't sort of copy and pasteable, and you don't know the kanji for. So in that situation, I use this application here, where you just free write the kanji, and the application kind of lets you know which one it's probably going to be, and then you can look that up and find the onyomi and kunyomi, the different types of readings there are for that kanji, and also includes things like example sentences, and I guess kanji set words as well. There are probably 2 or 3 more that I would also recommend, but I don't want to make this video too long, so if you do want me to talk about those as well, please do let me know in the comments below. That was a weird movement. There's sort of the 6 major tips or areas that I would recommend you to work on individually and make sure that you're sort of improving individually to sort of improve your entire language ability, Japanese ability. So we will also be making a Japanese only channel where we'll just be doing Japanese content. Hopefully we'll be doing subtitles with that one. If you can understand Japanese, please head to the link below. Hopefully it's up by the time we drop this video, but if not, we'll add it shortly after. If there is anything else that you want me to cover in terms of Japanese as a language or as a language learner or anything else Japan related, please do let me know and we'll see if we can make a video about it. Also, please do not forget to comment, like and subscribe. We are a small channel at the moment and we do want to make it big time, become the Mr. Beast of Japan content. Anyway, thank you very much. Peace out.